and welcome to my studio. We are going to work on a tutorial for this little oak leaf on a bit of a branch. So I have done my drawing in my sketchbook, I have done a tone study in the sketchbook, I have prepared all my colour and I'm going to do a still shot of that so you can read the colours properly. And then I traced the drawing, transferred it to watercolour paper, and now I am ready to paint the shadows on the watercolour paper. My shadow colour is made of nickel azo yellow, French ultramarine and perilene violet, so 3 primary colours, yellow, blue and red. The red is a bit purpley, but it doesn't matter, it's still a red. And the reason I chose perilene violet is because there was I could see some perilene violet in the wood of the little branch, and there was no obvious red in the leaf itself. So that ended up being my red for the harmonic shadows. So now I am ready to paint the shadows on the watercolor paper with that mix. And I'm going to follow this with my shadows on the watercolor paper. So for the moment I'm going to ignore the leaf and come back to it when I'm ready for the color. So I'm working wet in wet, painting half a leaf at a time. So first wetting the paper on the left of the leaf, making sure I go up to the edge and to the central vein so that I keep a tidy edge there, and making sure that the water is spread evenly, no puddles and no dry bits. Not even the highlights. And then some of the shadow color, just added wet in wet. In the shadows, the first half is dried, so I am wetting the second half of the leaf, but I'm leaving a little gap in between the first wet in wet wash on this one, because I'm leaving a little gap for the central vein. And I don't even need to tidy up my washes with a damp brush like I usually do, because I don't mind if the washes are a bit feathery here, they just blend in nicely in the rest of the leaf, making a very soft finish, very natural finish. And I quite like that. So that's it for the shadows. The shadows have dried, and the first color wash we're going to put on is nickel azo yellow. It's a Daniel Smith color. This time I'm going to work on the whole leaf, because that yellow is pretty much everywhere. But you can see why I was careful with diluting my shadow color and not going too dark with it, because when you put yellow on top of a shadow color, it doesn't hide the shadow at all. In fact, if anything, it makes the shadows even more prominent. And while that's still wet, I'm gonna add some Hansa Yellow Deep in the areas where the yellow is a little bit stronger, and I'm adding this wet in wet so it's blending straight on the paper rather than on the palette. While the yellow is drying, I can add my first wash of color on the little branch, and I'm using the burnt sienna for this. And I'm doing the outline as well as the shadows because I want to be able to erase the pencil as quickly as possible, which I'll be able to do after this first colored wash is done. So I am going to wet the whole leaf again. And I'm going to drop in the green. So I'm adding more pigment because I would really like to do the green in a single wash, without having to come back to it. For the next wash, it's time to introduce a little bit of brown. So we're going to work with a couple of earth colors. Still wet in wet, so I am still wetting the whole of the leaf before I drop in the pigments. So I'm starting with burnt sienna. And then while it's wet, I'm going to lift a little circle in the middle here, which is the center of the blemish, which is a lighter color. Like the eye of the storm. So I have a number 30, which is a tiny brush, and with the burnt sienna, I'm essentially drawing with a brush, really, which is drawing the detail at the same time as adding more color to it. And this is where my Perylene Violet is going to come in. And even where the highlight is, you can still have some texture of the wood going through the highlight. So although you have a highlight, you still need to do little bits on either side. So now we're finished with the wet and wet glazes. I'm going to start to do some dry brush work, and I am going to start with the veins, because the placement of the veins is quite important. So for that, I am following the drawing that I have done earlier and drawing the veins in a dark green. So I am gonna add a little bit of the French ultramarine to the sap green to make this kind of color. And I'm gonna draw the veins with a dry brush. So the central vein starts as a double line. So it's quite thick. And as I go towards the tip, until it ends up being a single line at the top. I make it thinner and thinner. Now we're going to start working on the blemishes. So you've got to observe your blemishes well. My main one is this one, really, that big blob which I have here, and then there's some damage on the edge here, and then maybe one here, a couple of dots here. But remember, don't overdo it on the blemishes. The good thing about a blemish on the edge of a leaf like this is that if you have a bit of a double line in between your washes, you can really tidy up that line really well. It's a good opportunity to do so. So I'm using raw umber on this, and then I'm moving on to burnt sienna. It's a good opportunity to add a little bit of colour as well, to build up a little bit of colour. And I'm going to start with the green here, with a green mix which is going to be slightly brighter than the colour I already have. In fact, I'm going to use pure sap green, the Royal Talents Rembrandt one, and I'm using a very old scruffy brush because I really want the hairs to split so that I get an uneven texture like this, and I'm just brushing it over the green area so you can see how badly I'm treating this brush. So it's just building up a little bit of colour, but less smoothly than the wet in wet washes. And I'm going to do the same on the other side, but with some brown this time. Bit of burnt sienna. So now I've added a bit of texture with a dry brush. I am just going to finish it off with a few tiny veins with a very small brush, concentrated paint, not too wet, like this. And with this I have the leaf in front of me, and I'm really observing very closely, because you can't make them up. If you try to make them up, they're going to end up in the wrong place. And if some of them disappear into the texture, it's okay. Don't try to recover all of them, because they do disappear into the texture. When you look at the relief, you can't really see every single one of them. You see a hint here and there, some that are more prominent, more visible than others. But a lot of them just fade out. And here we are, this is the oak leaf finished. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe if you did. I will do a downloadable PDF tutorial of this, which I'm gonna list in my online Etsy shop. And I will also give that written tutorial to my Patreon subscribers. And I have posted a longer version of this video, a paint-along video, on my Patreon site for my subscribers as well. Enjoy painting your own oak leaf, and I will see you soon in Atelier Sandrine Maugy for another video. Happy painting! Bye!